May 1945. The war in Europe was over, but the ocean was keeping secrets. When the Allies took surrender from Germany, dozens of submarines were unaccounted for. Crews, logbooks, and even entire U-boats had vanished. Weeks later, one of them, U-530, suddenly surfaced in Argentina. Another, U-977, followed. No one knew why they had crossed the Atlantic instead of surrendering in Europe. Were they running for their lives? Delivering secret cargo? Smuggling fugitives into safe haven? To this day, the answers remain buried at sea. This is the story of the lost Nazi submarines, vessels that blurred the line between history and legend. Quick heads up, if you like straight talk history with the loose ends left in, tap subscribe and stick around. I'll keep digging up the stories others skip. Now, let's pull the hatch and step inside. Spring of 1945 looked like the end of everything. Berlin was burning. Commanders contradicted each other. Some U-boat crews were told to surrender. Others were told to scuttle, meaning deliberately sink their own boats. And a few were told to disappear. In the noise, logs went missing, orders were destroyed, and a handful of submarines simply slipped the net. This fog of surrender is where the legends start. Because chaos loves a blank page, boats that went down without witnesses could later be reimagined as escape craft. Crews who fled could be rebranded as couriers of stolen gold or fugitives. The gaps in 1945 records became fertile ground for mythmakers. On July 10, 1945, U-530 glided into Mar del Plata, Argentina, 2 months after the war in Europe was over. On August 17th, U-977 did the same. The timing was strange. Why cross the Atlantic instead of surrendering in Europe? Interrogators from Argentina, the United States, and the United Kingdom had the same questions. Crews were pressed about cargo, about passengers, about any stopovers along the coast. The official conclusion: no VIPs, no secret payloads, just late, muddy arrivals from a lost cause. That didn't stop the talk. Local whispers insisted men stepped off before surrender. Some swore crates came off under armed watch, and newspapers at the time fanned the fire, printing headlines about possible Nazi leaders slipping through the cracks. And then there was a separate rumor that one of these boats had sunk Brazil's cruiser Bahia on July 4, 1945. Naval inquiries found a different, grimmer truth. An anti-aircraft drill accidentally hit the ship's own depth charges. She went down in minutes. It was a tragedy, not a torpedo. But if these boats weren't ferrying fugitives, why Argentina? Here's the part that's documented. After the war, networks known as rat lines, covert escape routes using forged papers and sympathetic officials, funneled wanted men from Europe to South America. Historians have mapped how the system worked. Safe houses across Italy and Spain, Red Cross travel documents issued under false names, and sympathetic church figures helping fugitives board passenger ships. Argentina, under President Juan Perón, became a magnet. His government admired aspects of German efficiency and saw value in importing German scientists, engineers, and even ideological allies. High-profile fugitives did arrive. Adolf Eichmann, architect of the Holocaust, lived quietly under a false identity in Buenos Aires until captured by Israeli agents in 1960. Joseph Mengele, the infamous camp doctor, also fled there. These were real, confirmed cases. Patagonia, Argentina's vast southern region, also became home to enclaves of German immigrants. Local rumors held that entire U-boat crews had blended into these settlements. Some villagers swore that mysterious men arrived with crates and cash, vanishing into remote valleys. While no document proves it, the environment, open, isolated, and already German-speaking in parts, made the story believable. That's why submarines showing up in Mar del Plata felt so unsettling. They arrived in the same country that later gave shelter to some of the most infamous fugitives of the war. From November 17, 1945 to February 11, 1946, the Royal Navy scuttled captured U-boats in the North Atlantic. Around 116 submarines were deliberately sunk, but the operation was messy. Weather in the North Atlantic was brutal. Tugboats struggled to haul U-boats out to scuttling zones. Some subs sank prematurely while under tow. Others broke loose in storms and went down unmarked. The official tallies didn't always match reality. Depending on which annex you read, the numbers shift. Some documents say 116, others list 120. A few boats appear on two lists at once as 116, once as 120 captured, once as destroyed. This kind of bureaucratic tangle was common after a world war, but to conspiracy-minded readers, it looked like proof of missing vessels. Thus was born the legend of the ghost U-boats. If records couldn't even agree on whether a submarine had been scuttled, then maybe it hadn't been. Maybe it was still out there. And once that idea takes hold, every sighting of a mysterious periscope in the South Atlantic could be rebranded as evidence. When people say hidden cargo, they often mean three things: stolen gold, secret weapons, or sensitive documents. There's one undisputed example of a submarine carrying extraordinary material: U-234. In May 1945, it was captured with advanced technology, including jet aircraft parts and what U.S. documents later described as uranium oxide bound for Japan. The uranium reportedly contributed to America's nuclear program. If you're building a myth about subs hauling the good stuff, U-234 shows it wasn't impossible in principle. A German submarine could, in fact, transport revolutionary cargo. That reality fed speculation about others. Some have suggested U-530 or U-977 carried Reichsbank gold, secret archives, or even experimental devices. Others tied them to missing art treasures looted from occupied Europe. The truth is simpler. No evidence has ever been produced to back those claims. But the documented example of U-234 shows why people keep believing. The most famous post-war legend says the Nazis built Base 211 in Queen Maud Land, Neuschwabenland, and that U-boats kept it supplied. Some versions go further. They claim submarines carried exotic technology, including the rumored device called Die Glock, the Nazi bell, said to be a prototype for anti-gravity or energy experiments. Others tie the story to strange lights in the sky, weaving Nazi U-boats into UFO lore. Where does this come from? Historians trace it to a 1947 book by Ladislas Chabot, published in Argentina, which blended fact and fiction. Later authors picked it up, expanding the story. Then came Operation Highjump in 1946 to 47. This was a massive U.S. Navy expedition to Antarctica with more than 4,000 personnel. Officially, its goals were logistical: to establish the Little America 4 base, test equipment, and train in cold weather conditions. But the expedition had problems. Several aircraft were lost in accidents. A few sailors died. Conspiracy theorists immediately linked these mishaps to a supposed battle against a hidden Nazi fortress. Some fringe writers claimed flying discs shot down American planes. The official logs, however, tell a different story: mechanical failures, extreme weather, and human error. Antarctica was, and still is, one of the most dangerous environments on Earth. As for Base 211, no credible evidence has ever been found. Polar expeditions and satellite surveys have revealed no trace of Nazi bunkers under the ice. The scholarly consensus is clear: Antarctica was mythologized, not militarized. In April 2018, the Sea War Museum Jutland announced the discovery of U-3523 off Denmark. For decades, it had been the perfect mystery, a cutting-edge design that simply disappeared. Rumor said it made a break for South America with valuables on board. The wreck turned up right where Allied aircraft had reported sinking it in 1945. No escape, no treasure run, just a wreck in the mud. Other wrecks tell the same story. Off Brazil, divers located U-513, which the U.S. Navy had sunk in 1943. It lay undisturbed for decades, but once identified, it showed no signs of carrying fugitives or treasure. Meanwhile, occasional reports of wrecks off Argentina spark new headlines. Sensational outlets sometimes claim these could be the lost treasure subs. Investigations continue, but so far, nothing has verified a U-boat transporting Hitler, Nazi gold, or secret weapons to Patagonia. Why do these stories survive? 3 reasons. First, timing. U-530 on July 10, 1945, and U-977 on August 17, 1945 felt late and suspicious. Crews explained they wanted to avoid surrender in Europe, fearing brutal treatment. But the optics, 2 boats popping up months later in Argentina, made the mundane explanation hard to swallow. Second, Argentina's record. When Eichmann, Mengele, and others were later found there, it confirmed the country really was a haven. So when subs appeared, it was easy for the public to connect dots, even if the methods didn't line up. Third, paperwork gaps. Operation Deadlight's conflicting lists turned into mystery. Mystery turned into conspiracy. Add Antarctica's blankness and whispers of Nazi gold, and you've got a recipe for a legend that refuses to die. Could individuals have slipped ashore from a U-boat before surrender? It's possible at a small scale. Locals in Patagonia did report sightings, but no primary document proves VIP landings tied to U-530 or U-977. The only wartime submarine with conclusively exotic cargo was U-234, headed not to South America, but to Japan, and it was intercepted. As for Antarctica, the scholarly consensus is no on Nazi fortresses. Operation Highjump's record doesn't support a hidden battle. Yet decades later, when a new wreck is found, headlines still ask if it ferried leaders or loot, because the lack of certainty is its own kind of fuel. Some submarines were eventually found, lying silent on the seabed. Others surfaced in Argentina under mysterious circumstances, and a few remain unaccounted for, fueling decades of speculation about treasure, fugitives, and even Antarctic bases hidden beneath the ice. What's certain is that each discovery tells us something different about technology, about fear, about how legends grow in the shadows of war. But what's uncertain, the unanswered questions, are what keep these stories alive. Because in the end, the lost U-boats aren't just wrecks of steel. They are graves, mysteries, and reminders that even the most powerful weapons can vanish into silence. If you want more forgotten history uncovered and told straight, hit subscribe, because forgotten history makes unforgettable stories.